April 1941. Nazi Germany attacks Yugoslavia. Belgrade is bombed from the air. Civilian neighborhoods are destroyed, and the state collapses within days. Occupation follows immediately, bringing executions, arrests, and fear. Across Serbia, Bosnia, Montenegro, and Croatia, resistance begins to take shape as partisan units form in forests and mountain regions. Berlin responds with ruthless repression. Civilians are declared enemies, villages become targets, and collective punishment becomes official policy. To fight this war, the Nazi leadership creates a special unit named the SS Volunteer Division Prinz Eugen, recruited also from ethnic Germans of southeastern Europe, trained not only for conventional battles, but for anti-partisan warfare and terror. Its task is to break resistance by destroying the population that supports it. The campaign that follows leaves burnt villages, mass graves, and thousands of civilian victims across the Balkans. But when the war ends, the perpetrators from the Prinz Eugen will pay for these crimes with their lives. The SS Volunteer Division Prinz Eugen, later known as the 7th SS Volunteer Mountain Division Prinz Eugen, was created at the end of 1941, and the goal was to use ethnic German minorities of southeastern Europe, the Volksdeutsche, and turn them into a weapon against the occupied population in the Balkans. The division was named after Prinz Eugen of Savoy. A commander celebrated for his wars against the Ottoman Empire in the Balkans in the 18th century. The SS leadership wanted to wrap the new unit in historical myth, presenting it as a continuation of centuries-old frontier warfare. The first commander, Artur Phleps, embodied this idea. A Transylvanian German officer, he was tasked not only with training the division, but with shaping its brutal character. From the start, Prinz Eugen was prepared not for conventional battles, but for anti-partisan warfare, a form of conflict in which civilians were treated as enemies. The division entered its first operations in southern Serbia in the autumn of 1942. These early actions already revealed its methods. Villages were searched, food was seized, and civilians and people were executed for minor infractions, or simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Refugees fleeing fighting were stopped, searched, and shot, and even in areas with little partisan activity, punishment was collective and brutal. In October 1942, the division took part in Operation Kopaonik, an offensive aimed at destroying Chetnik partisan units in the mountains of central Serbia. Militarily, the operation failed. Chetnik forces slipped away and avoided encirclement. For the civilian population, however, the operation was catastrophic. In the village of Kriva Reka, around 330 civilians were massacred in a brutal operation by German and Bulgarian forces. Of these, 270 were local inhabitants, half of the village's entire population, while more than 60 others came from nearby villages. At least 46 victims were forced into the local church, where the doors were locked and the building was set on fire. Men, women, children, and elderly people were burnt alive, and those who tried to escape the flames were shot. The massacre left the village in ruins, 100 houses were destroyed, and thousands of livestock were stolen. Nearby villages were looted and destroyed, and hundreds more civilians were killed across the region. This massacre became a defining symbol of the division's brutality. Through the winter of 1942 and early 1943, Prinz Eugen spread terror across Serbia and Bosnia. Villages were burned, civilians were arrested, tortured, and executed. Workers were forced into labor and shot when they were no longer needed. People were killed for possessing food or for alleged connections to resistance fighters. Violence was systematic, and looting became routine. In January 1943, the division joined Operation Weiss, one of the largest German anti-partisan offensives in Yugoslavia. The goal was to destroy the partisan movement led by communist Josip Broz Tito. Instead, it became one of the bloodiest campaigns against civilians. Tens of thousands of civilians fled their homes in panic, and refugee columns were attacked deliberately. Those who could not escape were slaughtered. Post-war investigations concluded that during this so-called Fourth Anti-Partisan Offensive, more than 3,000 civilians were killed and entire villages were wiped from the map. Only months later, from May to June 1943, Prinz Eugen took part in another anti-partisan offensive in southeastern Bosnia and Montenegro. Once again, the operation failed to destroy the partisan leadership, but civilians paid the price. In the Kriva region, entire villages were destroyed, and men, women, children, and the elderly were taken regardless of age or sex and executed in groups. Houses were burned with people inside. Yugoslav investigators later documented how infants were killed with their mothers, pregnant women were murdered, and elderly people were burnt alive. In the summer of 1943, the division committed further massacres in Bosnia and Herzegovina. In the village Rotimlja, 66 civilians were killed in a single day, and almost half of the victims were under the age of 15. On the same day, on the 12th of July 1944, members of the division killed another 68 civilians in the village of Košutica in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Members of the Prinz Eugen division soon killed also their former allies. After Italy surrendered in September 1943, Prinz Eugen was sent to the Dalmatian coast to disarm Italian forces and regain territory seized by partisans. During its advance, villages were devastated and 230 civilians were killed. After the capture of the coastal city of Split, the division executed 48 Italian officers who had surrendered, including 3 generals. These executions were carried out without trial and in clear violation of the laws of war. On the 28th of March 1944, one of the largest single massacres committed by the division took place near Knin and Sinj in southern Croatia. During one day, 2,014 civilians from more than 20 villages were killed. Civilians were herded into houses and shot through windows with machine guns. Even Croatian authorities, allied with Nazi Germany, investigated the massacres and protested to Berlin, but the result was the dismissal of those who complained, not punishment of the perpetrators from the unit. In July 1944, during Operation Draufgänger, the division took part in the massacre of the village of Velika in Montenegro. Around 550 civilians were murdered in a single action. In the after-war statement, Dr. Dusan Nedeljković from the Yugoslav State Commission said about the deeds of the unit in Montenegro the following: "Everything they came across, they burned down. They murdered and pillaged." The officers and men of the SS division Prinz Eugen committed crimes of an outrageous cruelty on this occasion. The victims were shot, slaughtered and tortured, or burnt alive in their homes. Where a victim was found not in his house but on the road or in the field some distance away, he was murdered and burned there. Infants with their mothers, pregnant women, and frail old people were also murdered. In short, every civilian met with by these troops in these villages was murdered. As the war turned against Germany, Prinz Eugen was increasingly drawn into defensive fighting. In September 1944, the Soviet Red Army had advanced to the Balkans. and the division suffered heavy casualties in defensive battles. In 1945, they were still fighting against partisans in Yugoslavia, but revenge for their crimes gradually came to them. The first commander, SS Obergruppenführer and general of the Waffen-SS, Artur Phleps, did not live to see the end of the war. By the autumn of 1944, German control in southeastern Europe was disintegrating. Romania had changed sides in August. Soviet forces were advancing rapidly, and German units were retreating in confusion. On the 21st of September 1944, Phleps was traveling only with his adjutant and driver near Arad in western Romania. He was attempting to assess the situation at the front while on his way to meet Heinrich Himmler in Berlin. Unaware that Red Army units had already reached the area, he entered the village of Simond in western Romania. Soviet troops were already present, and Phleps was captured without resistance. He was taken for interrogation and held in a local building. Later that same day, German aircraft attacked the village. During the chaos of the bombing, when Phleps and the other prisoners attempted to escape, Soviet guards opened fire. Phleps was shot and killed. A different fate awaited his successors, General of Mountain Troops Karl von Oberkamp, who commanded the division during some of its worst atrocities in 1943 and early 1944, survived the war. He was captured by American forces at the end of the conflict and later extradited to Yugoslavia. Unlike most members of the division, he faced a formal trial. A Yugoslav military tribunal examined his responsibility for massacres, deportations, and mass killings carried out under his command. Witnesses, documents, and post-war investigations connected him directly to operations in which villages were destroyed and civilians murdered. He was found guilty and sentenced to death. On the 4th of May 1947, Karl von Oberkamp was hanged in Belgrade. The last commander of the division, SS Brigadeführer and Generalmajor of the Waffen-SS, August Schmidhuber, also survived the fighting, but not the aftermath of the war. After Germany's defeat, the remnants of the division surrendered on the 11th of May 1945 near Celje in Slovenia to Yugoslav partisan forces. Schmidhuber was taken into custody and transferred to Yugoslav authorities. Like von Oberkamp, he was brought before a military tribunal. He was charged with direct participation and command responsibility for massacres, deportations, and systematic violence against the civilian population across Serbia, Bosnia, Montenegro, and Croatia. The court found him guilty, and on the 19th of February 1947, August Schmidhuber was executed by hanging in Belgrade. For the ordinary soldiers of Prinz Eugen, the end was far more chaotic and brutal. When the division surrendered after the war in Europe ended on the 8th of May 1945, thousands of its members fell into Yugoslav captivity. It is safe to say that almost all personnel of Prinz Eugen taken prisoner by the Yugoslav army were killed. These killings were carried out by partisan units at a local level, often as acts of revenge for years of terror and destruction. One of the largest known executions took place near the town of Brežice, in the eastern part of present-day Slovenia. Around the 22nd of May, 1945, approximately 2,000 former members of the division, many of them ethnic Germans, were stripped naked, bound together with wire, shot, and buried in a mass grave in an abandoned trench. Later discoveries of mass graves in the area confirm the scale of these killings. Similar executions resembling massacres more than formal punishments occurred elsewhere as well, though exact numbers remain uncertain. Though justice was chaotic and often brutal, the outcome was unmistakable. Prinz Eugen ultimately paid for its crimes.
Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe.
and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.